Hello, my name is Georgianne Ford with the Alpha Center for Divorce Mediation, and I'm here today with another attorney mediator that we have that we all know, Debbie Schneider. And Debbie is actually going to, this hot topic that Mike Ruth had covered, is going to give us even more additional information about what's going on with this housing market demand and going through a divorce or separation process. So Debbie, welcome back.
Thank you, Georgianne.
And please tell us what your point of view, what you're seeing out there with this housing market dilemma.
Well, the housing market right now is really added an additional layer of stress on divorcing couples. And that is because many times if one person is staying in marital residence, the other person needs to relocate, obviously. But there's very much a scarcity of suitable homes to buy. So if someone's looking to buy a new home, you can't just go out and buy something these days. The housing market is so tight that it's created, as I said, another layer of stress. And in some locations, the rental market, either for townhomes or apartments, is also a very tight market.
We just heard about that, right?
Any place to go for many couples. So they're stuck trying to cohabitate in the same residence during the course of the divorce. And we've always seen this. This is something that historically couples have done. Usually they do it because it's an economic necessity. So they've chosen to not relocate because the budgets during the transition phase of their divorce simply won't accommodate two households. So they have to settle everything before they can create a second household.
So what do they do? What are the options?
Well, one of the options is for them simply to stay in the same house. And that works for many couples. It really does. The first step, if that's the choice they're making, is for them to really come to an agreement. Now, it doesn't obviously need to be a written agreement, but a verbal understanding, I think, is really the first step to making this a success. So I think they just have to agree that this is what they're going to do. And they also need to understand, if it makes it easier, that this is not a permanent arrangement. So at some point in the future, they will be living separately. But
almost like coming up with separate rules for this.
Right, exactly.
Period of time.
Exactly. You need to set some new parameters for this arrangement.
Right.
So my first suggestion after they make this agreement is for them to simply get in touch with their patients, to get in touch with how they can accommodate this arrangement. So that often involves, seeking self-care, understanding that I need to be kind to myself, and in being kind and compassionate toward myself, I can also makes it easier to get in touch with the compassion I want to create for my spouse, right? We may be divorcing, but I want to create an environment, at least for now, that is not difficult and is not making the situation any more difficult. If you have children and they are aware of the divorce, then they also need clear communication from both parties that, again, they're going to cohabitate for a while. Everybody's going to be in the same house, but this doesn't mean that the divorce is not happening, right? Because children are often see what's happening around them and, oh my, well, okay, mom and dad said they were getting a divorce, but now we're all living together again, right? So
right.
It'd be very, very confusing for them. So I think clear communication is important. And I think then you need to move into a situation where, if possible, you create some clear boundaries, physical and emotional. So if, there need to be two different, obviously, sleeping accommodations, then you figure out how to do that, right?
Right.
And you figure out basically how to stay out of each other's way.
One of the things I heard was sometimes they schedule separate parenting time.
They can, yes, that often works well. If they're in a situation where one person can leave the house, or that one person can leave the house and the other remaining spouse can stay in the house with the children and have, custodial time, if you would, the house with the children. And then they switch out. So it works for the other parent as well. That often works. If you do that during overnights, that is a custody arrangement identified as nesting. So instead of the children moving from place to place, the parents move from place to place.
I've heard of that.
Yes, it works. Again, it works well for some couples. It typically is not very viable long term, but again, for a certain shorter period of time that's defined, sometimes it's a very useful tool. So I also recommend that if the parties have not been in therapy, this is a great time to find a therapist to help deal with, again, the emotional fallout of all of this. And certainly cohabitating is, can be difficult, no question about it. If they're not interested in seeking individual therapy, then often joining a divorce support group can be very helpful. You can hang out and talk about all these things that are happening to you with people who are going through a divorce. And that's a really, really helpful tool. Many couples, many people enjoy that and find a support group to be helpful. And the Office Center runs many support groups. We have in-person support groups, and we also have online support groups. So I would encourage anyone who's interested to seek out a support group with the Office Center. And I think ultimately the best solution is to figure out how to resolve all of your divorce matter in mediation with the Office Center. We can't make divorce easier. We can't make divorce less difficult, but we can certainly eliminate some of the difficulty with divorce.
Yeah, just hearing some of the things you brought up is to help people get through. The self-care I came across really loud for, I'm sure, all of us, and giving us some examples of that self-care, such as therapy and support groups.
Therapy, support groups, yoga can often be helpful. If you've been interested in starting a meditation practice, that's a great time to start meditating. You can find, again, it's helpful to find what you feel like is an emotional safe place.
Right. So you're giving people tools.
And meditation can do that.
Mm-hmm. And that's the tools to help us get through this housing situation until it works itself out.
Right. Exercise, taking a walk every day, finding an exercise partner and taking a walk every day with someone is often a great way to help with stress. Massage, any of the typical ways that we can support our own emotional health are useful in this time.
All these things would help us be less hostile in the home. And I think that's what I'm really hearing.
That's what I think is really the goal, mm-hmm. is somehow find a safe haven for yourself within that structure. And whatever it takes, that is what I would encourage.
So Debbie, thank you. This was helpful because you really kind of gave us some new options of if we do have to live with our spouses going through a divorce and there's children, just how do we make that less hostile? How do we take care of ourselves so we can be more compassionate?
Right. And when we take care of ourselves, I think it makes it easier to find compassion toward our spouse.
Please give us a call at 1-800-310-9085.